Hey everyone, Token Dave over here, the dorky token black guy who's just trying to get by. And welcome to another edition of First Attack. Here I share my thoughts on the pilot or first episode of a TV series. Keep in mind that the views that I'm about to express are not on the series as a whole. It is just my opinion on how well I feel the pilot or first episode stands on its own. Controversial alert! Controversial alert! Controversial alert! Controversial alert! Some of the views or some of the statements that I'm going to express will touch upon sensitive subject matters that will or most likely might generate negative responses. Okay? You have been warned. Alright? And yes, this especially goes for you social justice warriors. Alright? Anyway. So, just to let you guys know, I live in New York City. I was born and mostly raised here, and currently I am living in the borough that I was born in, which is the Bronx. Now, of all of New York City, the Bronx is the borough that has the worst reputation. And in the 80s and the 90s, New York City was nuts. There's an episode of Law & Order Criminal Intent where the medical examiner was reviewing something that kind of happened in 1992, and then she said that was during the Wild West days of New York, and she was correct. But if you really sit down and think about it, New York was the most dangerous place, the most dangerous city in the 70s and the 80s. In the 90s, it was Los Angeles, particularly South Central. So far in the 2000s, Chicago has that honor. And with that in mind, I am going to be talking about the first episode of the new series, The Chi. So, the plot of The Chi revolves around the murder of a young man that happened on a corner, and this particular murder directly affects the lives of 4 families that are not connected with each other, with the exception of this murder. Now, I know I'm being very vague about the plot, and that is because if I went into additional detail, this video would last a lot longer, and I would be spoiling some things, because I know some of you guys probably have not seen the first episode yet, So, let me start off by the fact that the acting in this show is amazing. With the exception of one side character, everyone in the show was flawless and on point. I know it's a little early to say, but if this is normally the pilot episode or the first episode has the worst acting. So if this is the bar that we have, I could probably see this show being nominated for an Emmy sometime in 2019, because the acting here is freaking amazing. Number 1. Number 2, the pacing and flow of the show is amazing. Despite this show being on Showtime, you don't have any commercial breaks. So, some of these shows, sometimes they have instances where the show will kind of drag or anything. Not here. You are engaged in everything, oh my God, to a T. So the writing is just amazing. Kudos to the writers on this. The musical score is actually done effectively well too. One thing that I noticed is when some series has really great scores, they kind of overuse them, too much. Here, it's used to a great effect, It does set the mood, when you hear the music, but when you don't hear the music, it still sets the mood because, basically they recognize how heavy these scenes are, and basically you can't have the music interrupting the dramatic impact of everything, So, with that out of the way, let's just talk about some negatives. Now, these negatives are not because of the show, more on how unrealistic some of the things are, Well, no. Before I go in there, let me backpedal. I have to talk about the four families. There, here, this is actually gives you a great feel about life in the inner city, because the four families that are interconnected, each of them are pretty much something that you see in a city. You have basically the guy that's brought and raised up in the area that is a pure product of his environment, and he's continuing the cycle by basically having swag and luring young women around and everything. But he is irresponsible when it comes to sex, and he is a baby. He actually has a son that he doesn't want to take responsibility for. He rather smoke, have sex, and waste his money on designer sneakers. You got people like that in this area. You also have basically, a guy that's been around the block and everything, who is who's the wise sage to a degree, that knows the streets and knows the people very, very well and get the information quicker than anyone else, But he is also kind of trying to do right by the younger generation, and is having romantic problems with a female whom he deeply cares for, but this particular female kind of really hasn't gave birth to a son or anything, and he's just being he's kind of being used, but I'll explain that in a little bit. You have the person that's from the area that has done well and is a standing citizen and is trying to move up in the world. However, his parent does not like him for that, out of spite and jealousy, because he is not able to take her up there with him at the time period. And you have the kid that basically is just trying to live day to day, trying to get by school and everything, and is entering puberty, So those are the four main characters and everything, Now, let's get into some hot button issues that I'm going to have. See, this show actually, one thing that this show does display is the power that black females have. Black females actually are the heart of the African American community, and they can use their influence and use their powers to basically try to sway the men to have them do better in life and put them in the right path. Sadly, you only have really one female that does that in this show. And the other females are actually either A, manipulating the men, B, are very jealous and very petty about, them having their men being more successful than them, or C, basically they themselves are trying to get by and see that basically they have not contributed to raising an African American male correctly, but that could be due to a lot of sociological reasons. A thing that happens in this show is constant basically presence of the police. Now, this highlights actually how African Americans and blacks do not trust the police officers at all, and they do a good job of explaining this. Heck, one of the ways that one character gets manipulated is because basically he knows the score. He knows how police officers really don't solve violent crimes that happen, because it's just another dead black person. So they don't really have the pressure, or don't really give too much. They don't really care too much. As a whole, that's how they come off to us, all right? It's not saying that all cops are that way. It's just how things have, just the way things kind of are and how they've been portrayed, I can go into a deeper conversation about this some other time, but bear with me right this. It's just with the history of how police officers have interacted with the community, it has not been in the best footing. Now, there is one cop on the show that is actually what people call the good cop, the cop that is just trying to do good in the community. Now, this cop is kind of unrealistic to a degree, because he's a detective and he's on his own a lot, but you could tell he's one of the younger detectives who's trying to do right, and you see that another detective that's a more senior detective is like, a little frustrated with him being a little too naive. That cop would not be able to go on his own like that because like he's still young, he's still new. So basically he would have actually had to have buckled in under the pressure to be able to still keep his job and do his job, because when you're a cop, doesn't matter. You are still trying to make a living, and you are still trying to be able to get home safe at night. Sometimes that means having to play the game of going along with things. It's kind of like how the Republican Party is right now with Donald Trump. A lot of them really don't like what Trump is saying and is doing because he is actually not helping issues. He is actually making things a little more complicated, but they don't speak out strongly enough because they still have to push their agenda, and Trump is the president right now, so Trump is the one that's trying to push their agenda. So it's kind of how it is with the police officers in larger cities. Now, a cop like that, you can see in a suburban area, a rural area, in a blue state. Yes, I'm saying this, in a blue state, because they've actually had more experiences with multicultures, more so than like some of the shootings or some of the unjustifiable things that you see in a red state or what is considered a toss-up state. But a cop like that in the big city, yeah, nah, he'd have to play to the crowd just to be able to do his job. Another thing that happens in this show now. One thing that I noticed about this show that they placate true is sometimes people in my area do things really, really stupid. For example, you hear gunshots or something suspicious happens. You can do one of two things. You can go in the opposite direction and live another day and not have to deal with anything else like that. Or you could stick around and go to the direction where everything happens and potentially end up getting killed or end up getting arrested or end up getting into the system some way. So you see a lot of the people doing something like this, all right? And doing the latter instead of the former. I did the former a lot, and that's probably one of the reasons why I'm still around to this day. Because I saw some shit when I was a kid. I saw the first gunshots, like gunfight. I saw the first one happening at 6 years old, and I actually remember my dad. One day when I was 5, when we were walking back from the corner store, he stopped and instantaneously hugged me really, really tight. And I didn't understand why he did that. Come to find out later in life, he did that because there was a drive-by shooting and he was trying to shield me from it. But, you try to go from the opposite direction. Probably one of the reasons why I'm still alive. One character here, he sees the body and he pilfers from it. So it's like, dude, you're going to leave DNA. You're going to leave evidence. They're going to find you. Either the cops or the people that, are cool with this kid. They're going to find you. Why are you doing this? And what's even dumber is that one person actually is wearing something from that dead body, and he's walking around the same area with that. So we all knew something was going to happen. But anyway, I said that. Oh, and another crime actually happens in this show, and the youngest person witnesses the crime, and the youngest person not only witnesses the crime, the person that perpetrated the crime ran into him, and that guy ran off. That wouldn't happen. That little kid would have been dead on the spot. One of the reasons why you hear about multiple homicides within a short time period is because, like I said, instead of running off in the opposite direction, like that kid should have done, he stuck around, he saw something that he should not have seen, and, basically, he should have gotten killed because that's what ends up happening in the real world, in these environments. But overall, what do I have to say about the show? Awesome acting, awesome writing, great musical score, properly paced and properly fit, and did a lot to actually address some things that happen in urban communities. So I gotta say that The Chi is a critical strike. All right? Agree? Disagree? Drop me a comment below. Give me a like. Follow me on Facebook at Token Dave or on Twitter at TokenDave80. Subscribe. Ring that bell so you know when a new video loads. And spread this video out. But until then, this has been Token Dave, the dorky token black guy who's just trying to get by. I'll catch you guys later.